Returning to one of our top stories, protests have erupted outside the US consulate in Sydney. They're calling for an end to what they say is an oppressive regime in Iran. Joining me live now is member for Menzies, Gabrielle Ning. Gabrielle, thank you for your time. Your electorate in Melbourne's northeast is home to Australia's largest Iranian community. How are they feeling with the unrest escalating in Iran, and are there any plans for a demonstration in your electorate?
Well, thanks very much for having me here, Julia, to talk about this really important issue. As you say, I'm lucky enough to have the largest Iranian community in Australia in my electorate, and they're a really important part of the community. You know, they're our small business owners, they're our school students who achieve academic excellence, they're involved in our local business networks and in our local community. And one of the, or some of the cultural highlights of our calendar are the Persian Fair in Box Hill and the Fire Festival that we have in Roughy Lake Park. And as you can understand, this is a really distressing time for our local Iranian community. First and foremost for their loved ones and for their country, seeing the really brave actions of the Iranian people in protesting for their human rights in Iran, and then the very violent response from what is a very repressive regime. So our government stands with the Iranian people, and I very much stand with our local Iranian community with the distress and concern that they're fearing and feeling about the situation there.
And what more can the Australian government do at this time? What are the people in your electorate telling you needs to be done?
Yes, well, I've been in contact with local leaders as well as members of the community, and they're very much urging the government to speak out in support of the Iranian people, and also to ensure that the eyes of the world are watching what's happening there. And that's exactly what we've done. Of course, the Foreign Minister has made a joint statement with the leaders of the European Union and with the leaders of Canada, just highlighting that the Iranian regime must uphold the human rights of the Iranian people, as well as the statements by the Prime Minister supporting the Iranian people at this time.
And many people in your electorate would have family over there at the moment. We know that there's been an internet blackout and a cut of communication too. How nervous would they be at the moment, and are you hopeful that there could be some kind of regime change?
Well, as you say, many members of the community are really distressed and have reached out to me about exactly what you're describing, about being unable to contact loved ones and about being unsure of the situation there. You know, we've heard reports of hundreds of people being killed by the regime and people flooding into the hospitals. And those are deeply distressing. And I think the uncertainty caused by those internet blackouts and by the telephone blackouts just increases that distress and anxiety. And this has been a difficult 12 months for the Iranian community with the conflict that occurred there last year. And I'd make the point as well that in many ways this is a community that's been traumatised by having escaped a repressive regime. So my office always stands ready to support the Iranian community in any way that we can, and the government stands with the Iranian people.
Just another topic. We've seen the Prime Minister announce today that Kevin Rudd will end his term as US Ambassador 1 year earlier. What did you make of this news, and who do you think should replace him?
Oh, look, as I understand it, Kevin Rudd has been offered another opportunity as President of the Asian Society. So he's stepping down as after a very successful 3 years as Ambassador to the US. In terms of, speculating about who might fill his shoes, I think the announcement was only made about Kevin Rudd stepping down this morning. We'll be looking for somebody who is qualified and has deep ties in the US, and that announcement will be made by the Prime Minister in due course.
And of course, Parliament is returning early, heading back next week to consider those reforms in the wake of the Bondi terror attack. The bill will allow hate speech as long as it's quoted from a religious text. So there is that carve-out for religious texts. What's the reasoning behind this?
Well, as you say, we're heading back to Parliament next week, and we're heading back early to ensure that we're taking a timely response to the horrific terrorist attack that occurred in Bondi, the anti-Semitic terrorist attack. We think it's really important that we take timely action on this. In terms of the legislation, as you've pointed out, it does address hate speech offences, and there is a defence in terms of religious text. Now, obviously, this goes to really important balance between making sure that we're addressing some of the hate speech and divisive speech that has occurred in Australia, while at the same time preserving people's religious rights.
And just before we let you go, on the situation in Victoria with the bushfires, we're seeing Premier Jacinta Allen heckled. A woman saying government policy to blame for how bad the situation has gotten there. What do you make of the response to this disaster?
Well, look, I mean, this has been a really anxious time as well for the Victorian community with the bushfires that have been taking place, including my community in Menzies. We've got a bushfire-prone area in the northern area of my electorate, and the CFA volunteers have been doing an absolutely amazing job. Of course, there has been a life lost in the Longwood fires, and my condolences and the condolences of the government go out to the family of that person who has lost their life. But look, from my perspective, on the ground, I've been seeing what an incredible job the CFA volunteers have been doing. And in terms of the wider state response, the federal government has been working hand in hand with the state government. The Prime Minister was there earlier in the week with the Victorian Premier, providing support to some of the communities that are directly affected by those fires. And that's something that the federal government will continue to do, provide support and assistance to the people who have been affected by those fires.
Gabrielle Ning, thank you for your time and speak soon.